welcome to another episode of the Not in the Cloud podcast, and we're joined here today by Davinder Toor, right? He's an idol, an icon for me. I mean, I'm not...
Absolutely. No, I can agree. I can attest to that because...
look, I'm being honest with you. I've seen you since I was quite young, right? And I've always sort of looked up to the whole team who done, the G Team 5088 and the whole team who were at the V&A as well. And I didn't know them at the time. I mean, I was 9 or 10 when I went to the V&A, but it still had an impact.
You still remember it?
Still remember it.
Yeah.
Still remember it.
And for those that don't know, what were those about?
So the V&A was to do with Sikh arts and history, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's called Arts of the Sikh Kingdoms,
Yeah.
1999, right? Yeah.
I mean, the big thing that we heard, right? I went with the Gurdwara, and the Gurdwara said, well, they got Maharaj Ranjit Singh's throne there, right? And everyone was like, we got to go and see Maharaj Ranjit Singh's throne. And at a 9-year-old, you don't know who Maharaj Ranjit Singh is, right? But it was fascinating to see the armory there. It was fascinating to see just a few, items of our history. And I think a lot of people got interested in that at that time.
Yeah, I think it's one of the first times I think many people were exposed to, that kind of artwork being rich cultural kind of heritage of the Punjabis, of the Sikhs, being on display, but in like a really major institution. It's a big museum in the Victoria and Albert Museum. It's special, right? So it attracted lots of visitors from different parts of the country and abroad. I think for the museum, probably initially, it was a bit of an unknown, in terms of like whether it would be a success or not. And then they were overwhelmed and surprised by the success because the Sikh Punjabi community really engaged with it. But I think what's interesting, just like you say, like it's stuck in your mind, it's stuck in my mind. I must be about 10 years older than you then, and so like,
Quick
yeah. And I think it's very powerful, and what I think striking about it is that it's very powerful even if you know nothing about it going in. So it can be your first time into a museum space, but the actual artwork in front of your face is tangible, it's real. You're not seeing it in a book.
Yeah.
It brings everything to life.
I think that last bit of being tangible and being relatable as well to an extent, because Saurabh, you encapsulated by saying it was our history that you saw then. And I remember like as a kid, like we'd go on school trips and like science museum or natural history museum, and you see like bones of like dinosaurs, and they've got a rendition of what that dinosaur might have looked like back then, but there's no connection. It's like, oh, that's amazing, but there's no real draw, or like there's no real kitsch. But when you see something like that we can say, this is part of our history, and this isn't like long ago either. So being able to bring that to life in the way that you've done it with your collection, I'm sure we'll go through it, how you then add sound to that experience along with the visuals, and what kind of impact are you trying to give to the person that's walking through that exhibition. So for me, it was, I came across your work through Instagram originally, and again, I genuinely feel like it's an inspiring moment to have you here. Having a chat with us, so thank you.
First of all, I want to say thanks for the invitation. Trust me, it's not inspiring to have me here and all, but it's it's been obviously I know you guys. We've had good conversations, meaningful conversations. So no, I'm privileged and honoured to be here to be able to discuss something that I love with you guys. Something that we all kind of care about, and I think it's interesting. I think what's satisfying for someone like a collector, for example. Someone's curating an exhibition like his is the engagement. That's what you feed off of. If you have something, let's say you have you're fortunate enough to have a passion, the moment that you can have that passion in kind of like a solitary way, but the moment that you share that with somebody and then they have that, they're sparked by something, and then you think, oh wow, that's great. So it kind of spurs you on. And I think the first exhibition that we did at SOAS in 2011. I remember, working on that exhibition with Paramjit from Kashi House, and by that time, I was in my early 31, and had collected a fair few things by that point, but never really thought about ever doing an exhibition. I think it sounds strange now because we've had a few since then, and I remember part of the kind of apprehension was are people going to engage with this stuff? Like, are they even going to like what we are really fanatically passionate about? Like, what if someone doesn't engage with it and like it? Like, are people even going to? It sounds really odd, but are people even going to turn up? You know, that's what we were thinking about at the time, and I think the lesson to get from it all, very simply, is, you know, people talk about being, you know, I think we try to be as authentic as we can possibly be. I think, you know, that's crucial, but equally, simply, if you're passionate about something, and you can just get that passion across, then that's the job done. Like, you know, if it doesn't hit the mark, it doesn't hit the mark, but that's all you can do.
But I think where you've nailed it, and not just you, I think Paramjit Akashi House, Amadip Madra, and even, I mean, the Dallas thing to an extent as well, is the storytelling item. Because GT 1588, there was items there that you could interact with. Like, we were just talking about the shaft painting. That was one of the things.
So what was that? Because obviously we never had that opportunity. We were young. We were younger at that time. So yeah, what was your memories of that?
GT 1588.
So what was that exhibition?
So GT was Golden Temple, right?
Yeah. So 1588, the year that the foundation stone is laid. But the exhibition was actually, it was titled The Golden Temple: Reflections of the Past. Okay. It was at the Brunei Gallery at SOAS, which is a great space, and it was a great space for us because we had a lot of freedom there, being able to curate our own kind of show, and lots of support. Brilliant space. And then. It was over 2 floors. We had quite a lot of space. There was a publication, I think, that came out soon afterwards, by Kashi House, which wasn't a strict catalogue for the show, but it was I think over 500 images of Darbar Sahib, Harmandir Sahib through history, from some of the earliest photographs or paintings, to kind of, I think it stopped short of kind of later part of the 20th century, but it was like you said, the storytelling. So you can't just have an exhibition which is now going to be just 100 photographs of the Golden Temple, right? Like, so it's like, but then so upstairs, we introduced kind of early kind of Sikh philosophy. We'll look at, and everything's happening through objects, through pictures. So you're engaging with, initially as you come in, you're engaging with seeing a painting of Guru Nanak. Reflecting the kind of Siddh Ghost, he's meeting these yogis in Achal Batala, yes, a Janam Sakhi painting, but straight away, the visitor wasn't seeing Guru Nanak with a grey beard. Yeah. So suddenly you're seeing a young Guru Nanak who's got a black beard, he's got a, Seli Topi. You might not even be able to detect him. In fact, even when that picture was found, it wasn't even sold as Guru Nanak.
Oh wow.
Right, so top, right? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Okay. And it's
you see the tilak as well.
Yeah, so I remember when I found that picture in it's in the In Pursuit of Empire. I think it's also in some of the other Kashi House publications, might be Warrior Saints. But it's I remember when it was sold at an auction in London, like, it was described as a meeting of yogis.
Oh, wow.
Because it's this 2-group meeting of yogis, like all you could is Kanfat yogis, their earrings and stuff, meeting, but in the centre is Guru Nanak. Then there's Bala Mardana in there too, right? So but that in itself, you kind of, I think, even with our exhibition here, like, I think it's quite important to, as part of that storytelling, in order for it to be immersive, it's for, not with any particular agenda, but just to shake up something initially. So, for example, at the Wallace Collection exhibition, you're greeted by this massive blow up of this battle scene, depicting the taking of Sirhind. So it's like, okay, I kind of know what I'm in for here. We're not taking any prisoners, sort of thing. Like, we're going to dive into it, and that's what that was. So I think that's crucial. I think it was for that show was. It's just a challenge how we interact with art, and also bearing in mind that for many people, this is the first time that you're seeing an original work of art that dates to the 18th or 19th century. Yeah.
And Bhaji, you mentioned that when you started, there was no real intention of maybe even starting an exhibition or doing an exhibition. Was collecting when you started a bit easier because maybe that awareness wasn't there that this is a Sikh artifact? And it was that original painting was sold to you as just a meeting of yogis, and maybe there wasn't as much competition. Has it become harder now to kind of procure artifacts, or is it still the same?
Yeah, so I mean, it certainly is harder now. So it's certainly harder in terms of entry. The entry level, is higher. So and we know that inflation's only gone up, and wages haven't increased. So it actually becomes harder. Money's worth less and less. Yeah. Right. So it's become harder, I think, for people to come in at a certain level, but that was a continuation from. That's just the way it happened. So equally, had I been around in the 1970s or 60s, I would have found even better items, even cheaper, kind of comparatively. So that's just the way that it goes. However, I remember with that picture, it wasn't necessarily cheap, because I remember bidding on that, and all it takes is one more person. Yeah. But somebody else knew. Somebody else who knew it was Guru Nanak. Yes. So then I find myself bidding against someone else who knew, and then it fetches what it fetches, and everybody's wondering why this picture's made so much money. So it's challenging, but as you going back to your question, like there was no original intention. No, there wasn't that, and I don't think you can really approach it that way. I think it's so you never know what you're going to find. You never know which way some kind of research is going to surface and what direction that might take you in. And the reason why the exhibition came back in 2011 was that was the first time, I think, probably, that we were able to look at the collection and other collections and then say, is there enough here which is worthy of doing an exhibition or telling a story? And I'm very much a fan of storytelling, like as a vehicle to engage people with these types of work. Like these, there's nothing like a work of art to be able to weave a story from that then connects philosophy, history, culture of nobility, whatever it might be, and then also the trick is how do you make it relevant? How do you make it connect to you now? And I think that's really the success of any exhibition, I suppose, is do you feel engaged personally, and is it? And maybe you ask this question of yourself subconsciously, but what use is it to me, like now, like. Is there a practical use to me now that I can implement in my life? Like maybe some people don't.
Talking about that practical, that element, and I think we spoke about this on our first meeting, is after those, like the V&A and then GT 1588, when people started saying gold dastara, like round turbans, I think the diaspora in the UK started changing the way that they tied the dastard, and I don't know. I think you see the same thing, right?
Yeah. I think it's like any. When we think about, we talk about influencers now, don't we? The language that we use, right? And fashion, like just fashion as a concept. What does it mean for something to become fashionable, right? We've got to, show it in a particular way, get someone looking good in something, and you market it in a particular way, and you might even pretend that it's more popular than it is.
There's brand identity there as well.
Yeah, and then it's going to get picked up by somebody because essentially, we want to be popular, or we're struggling with a bit of insecurity or whatever that might be, but we look and we want to mimic, and and I think when we look at art through the ages, they're depicting what people are doing, but the more you're seeing that, you see these fashions take up, when you see it change also over time. So you mentioned sort of like turban styles, like bug styles, like they vary and change. Yeah. And I think and I think the fact that people have reacted to that in that way. Imagine physically now changing how you're going to dress just because you've seen a picture. That's one aspect of it. One aspect of it is that we're going to engage with the physical, aren't we? So we're going to immediately look at people in these photographs or paintings
and try and emulate.
Because you're thinking, well, actually, either rightly or wrongly, you're connected to me somehow. Like you are my ancestor. You're linked to my heritage. I quite like how you look, and what's going on here. But that's one aspect of it. It's the physical engagement. Then the other side of it is the ideology and the philosophy that sits with that, which then you start to question, because then you can start to. And I think that was kind of certainly an interest, I think, for people like myself or the guys, Amandeep and Paramdeep Kashyas, like these guys. I think it's hard to articulate, but at that time when we were looking into this stuff, and I was younger, right? So they were my mentors, but there was a yearning for something which was more authentic, not the thing, but just a general kind of discomfort with what you might be experiencing now because it didn't sit well with what you might have understood or thought you understood philosophically, and then to you had it, and you got this we got this romantic idea of what things were like, and then you're seeking that older knowledge,
It's similar to the music that we're listening to now, right? So you can see the revival of Rababi traditions. You've got the music traditions that are coming around now, but that's only because of the work that was put in after partition till sort of the 90s, where people started talking about it again only in the 90s. But who was keeping it alive in those times, right? Who was, and those people were instrumental in now what we hear, because everyone picks up a Dilruba and thinks, yeah, I'm gonna be a fantastic raggi now, but actually imbibing that tradition.
When an artist creates a piece of work, we hear time and time again they're putting a piece of their self out there, and at that moment they're quite vulnerable. And I think you mentioned something similar, but even though you're collecting the art, but you're trying to put this story together, and I think there's that element of, and you're wondering, what are people going to be thinking about this, or what impact is it going to have? Even though the artist is putting their self out there, but you actually creating those pieces of work individually into a story, and there's that sense of vulnerability. Where do you think that comes into play in terms of telling that story?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's a good point. I think I think ultimately, that's what we're attracted to. I think we are. I can't pretend to be an artist, although I liked painting and drawing when I was young, and but I didn't stick with it. But I suppose when you think about anything, what is an art? Right, so what you're doing here is an art, right? You guys have taken something and you're creating something. This in itself is a work of art, isn't it? Like, you're expressing aspects of yourselves, putting it out there. You've thought about how to structure your conversations, how you're going to display it physically, whatever it might be. But you're creating something. So if you're creating something, essentially, there's a piece of art at the end of it. And I suppose in many ways, an exhibition is in itself, like, if you look at it holistically, that whole thing is a work of art, right? And there's many of us coming into that. So you are, and then when you're doing that, you are putting, if it's, there's no point doing it in like a half-hearted way. You are going to say you're going to give yourself to that, aren't you? And devote yourself to that, because then I want to give everything to that so it can hit the mark that I want it to hit, like with an exhibition or a publication. And I think that's what we feel. So I think that's what we feel when we look at a work of art. Sometimes you can sense that maybe an artist didn't give themselves to something, and maybe that artist mimicked something. Maybe they were copying something. Maybe they were trying to produce something that, for the sake of popularity, so that it become popular, so it could give something to the masses that they already wanted. So then, therefore, it might become an unoriginal idea, right? And I think you end up sensing that sometimes. Some people do, and some people don't. And every now and then, you'll have something you think, oh my God, like they've really gone for it, And what I find really fascinating is that, even in this exhibition, like, there are many works of art where these artists haven't even left their name.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? They didn't. That wasn't even a part of their thought process to even say, "Here's my stamp. Like, here's my remember me."
Yeah.
So, like, there's various reasons for that. But imagine, what I'm really attracted to is this idea of an artist who is, gives themselves to something, doesn't want to be remembered because it's about the work, and it's about the effort that they put in, and then that's out there for judgment. And they're vulnerable in that respect. We're now judging, us non-artists are judging artists' work. Yeah. And it's like, well, who am I to judge? And especially when you put yourself out there. And I think sometimes that's what we feel subconsciously when we see a really fantastic work of art. but it's about original thought. It's also about they're exposing something of themselves that most of us try very hard to hide to get through life, and these artists will actually, they'll say, here it is, I'll give it to you, now judge me. That's brave, isn't it? That's kind of, I think, and I think that's what we sometimes can feel, I think, without words, without somebody explaining that to you.
I think strangely we see that in the works and the contemporary paintings of Maharaj Ranjit Singh. I don't think we was talking, I think the painting that kind of is representing the current exhibition. I think one thing you mentioned, it was quite a young artist. One thing, he was brave enough to show Maharaj Ranjit Singh ji, I nearly fell back. No, I'm vulnerable with this chair. Not fully on the side view, because I think a lot of the other paintings we see is from a side view, and he was brave enough to show Maharaj Ranjit Singh ji in his like.
It does, and he's young. We know that from if we look at his kind of age date, his birth date, and also we know when this painting is roughly when it's produced. So it's produced during the Maharaja's lifetime. So it's a contemporary picture, and obviously artists sometimes they flatter the king. Sometimes you won't see a blind eye. They show you a different profile. They might change his eye depending on what kind of profile they want to show you of the Maharaja. And here we get to see Ranjit Singh probably in the last few years of his life.
Does that demonstrate something about Maharaji, that that insecurity wasn't there? They didn't care about the eye.
Yeah, absolutely. There's and this isn't just the only one. So there's in the National Army Museum, there's a contemporary ivory portrait of Ranjit Singh, which was a gift from him. So he was giving out these portraits, and that's also a portrait where you can see his blunder. It's more of a question of some artists maybe not wanting to depict him in a particular way, but Gera Singh, interestingly, who was a court artist, does. And this picture is inscribed in English. It's been taken away or maybe commissioned by an Englishman at the court who wants to document this event, this meeting, this relationship, which also actually Gera Singh is brave enough to depict, is this relationship between Ranjit Singh and Hira Singh Dogra, Dhyan Singh Dogra's son, and how this young boy has a lot of influence over the Maharaja. He's one of the few that's allowed to sit on a chair in his presence. Right, so we get details here. We get details of their relationship. We get details of, how the Maharaja likes to sit. We know that he doesn't like to sit in the golden throne very often.
And why is that relationship interesting?
In terms of their relationship, well, we know that Dhyan Singh Dogra, his father, he's kind of like the Machiavelli in the court. He is, it's Dhyan Singh's older brother Gulab Singh Dogra that buys Kashmir, in exchange for making, when he's making his deals with the British during the Anglo-Sikh Wars. And it's hoped that Hira Singh will eventually, maybe he can come to the throne. People know that Karak Singh, the next in line, may not be up to the task. So people are moving, and finding their kind of positions. It's also quite controversial because some say that they had a relationship. And this is how young Hira Singh gets influence over the Maharaja. Hira Singh's about 4 or 5 hours a day learning English. He's often the guy that Ranjit Singh's sending to meet the British when they come, so they're trying to converse with him. So there's all sorts of questions that we can ask from a picture like this. Also, this doesn't give you an idea of it, but the actual painting, there's quite a lot of negative space in that picture. When you actually see the picture in the flesh, you'll see that this is really focused, quite tight, small and detailed, and it's like this is about them. This is about this relationship. This is about these two characters. This is about the Maharaja in his later years. Who is he influenced by? And interestingly, you'll see the Maharaja with a little cup here, and you see here even in the inscription it says Hira Singh in the capacity of cupbearer, Raja Hira Singh, in the capacity of cupbearer. So who are you to be in control of the Maharaja's drink in terms of the level of trust? Right, you're the guy that's allowed to, Ranjit Singh, when he would eat, they say that, he'd had food tasters who would taste all his food, and then they'd be watched for 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
Before he gets to eat that food, because we want to find out what's going on.
Just on a side note, I don't want to wreck your train of thought. No. I was watching a video of Putin meeting Kim Jong-un, and they sort of have a glass of water each, and they look at each other, they're like, they put it down.
Wow. Neither of them
trust each other, even though they're allies.
But I think also that in itself, once you start to look at some of these artworks in this way, we're also starting to kind of question the culture of the nobility. Yeah. We're questioning how people rule. Yeah. What are the principles under which what are the things that you should be aware of, and all these kind of things as normal people. That can maybe link us back to start maybe looking at the Guru's Darbars, for example, because they're equally living and acting, like kings. So what are the practicalities of that? So even in that picture, for example, everybody knows that Ranjit Singh was fond of a drink or two, right? And but there's an account that says that actually later on in his life, he really wants to prolong his life. He's now worried about his death, and that wherever he goes, there's someone who carries his medicines in a bottle, and he's always sipping from his little medicines. And so we don't know what he's drinking in that scene. So it's quite, but that in itself is quite interesting, isn't it? We mustn't forget that he is the son of Maharaj Singh. His dad is a ruler of that misl, Sukrajakia misl, before him. So he's grown up. He's been born into that culture. They're a smaller confederacy, smaller misl, but they are a ruling family. I think all of that kind of stuff is part and parcel of the game in terms of, this is what they're going to do. These are, we think about the education levels, we think about who he's employing, we think about the technology, the Shastra Vidya, all that stuff has gone. These are men. I think in the catalogue there, I kind of, I remember writing the foreword and thinking about, well, how do I quickly kind of introduce someone to who Ranjit Singh is quickly? Think about, many people are going to engage with this exhibition who might not know who he is. How do we quickly tell you why we need to be talking about this character, why he's so important? And I refer to an instant in 1796 where 30,000 Afghans under Zaman Shah come to the city of Amritsar, and Sikh chiefs, he accounts that many Sikh chiefs, they fled. They went to the hills, they ran off. So already now, as a Sikh reading about that, I'm engaged because I'm like, hang on, there's guys that run away.
Yeah.
Right? No one ever talks about the guys that run away. Yeah. Of course, 30,000 Afghans just turned up. Yeah. Some people are going to run away, right? Yeah. There are other, but then you read, okay, well, there's other characters who make their alliances with the invaders. They make their deals, and they're also Sikhs. So they know that these Afghans come and say, well, actually, can you spare us if we can do this and that, the other for you? Yeah. So then there's those characters, and then there's Ranjit Singh. And, we know that he is blind in one eye from age of 5, smallpox. He manages to get 5,000 men together. He meets the Afghans outside of Amritsar, 5,000, and pushes back 30,000.
Who pretty much, at that point are willing to die for this man, right, for this 5,000 Sikhs.
So who are these 5,000 that he's managed to get? Yeah. But he does that successfully while others run off, and he's 16 years old.
Wow. Well, he's a child, basically.
So this... Then, this is somebody who, how do you do that? What else has to be in place? Yeah. And that's when, so the idea of obviously him having food tasters or whatever else was going on, it's kind of becomes very obvious, doesn't it? Because then you think, well, actually, no, okay, now we understand what's happening. So he's inheriting and stepping into a culture that is existing. The fact that off the back of that, within 3 years, he takes Lahore. This is a fort, a city at the age of 19. Yeah, he takes Lahore before he takes Amritsar, and Amritsar's in charge. There's other Sikh missiles that are in charge. I think it's Bungri missiles that's in charge of Amritsar. So he's young, but he's fully assimilated in this culture. It exists. It is not something that he invents. No. It's something that he just steps into.
That first room of the exhibition is where it's this post-empire period, and you've got these pictures of Guru Arjan Dev Ji with the weaponry, and where is that coming from? And Bhai Daru Singh Ji, he relates that Daulat Khan, he has 4 sons, and it said, according to the text, that those 4 sons were due to the blessings of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. So when Guru Nanak Dev Ji is doing their meditation, they would sit in the grave sites. And that's why in Gurbani, Guru Nanak Dev Ji is referred to as even as a ghost in some places in Gurbani. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji gives the 2 wives of Daulat Khan 2 berries, and then they have 4 sons. And later on, Daulat Khan and even we'd hear the name Rai Bular, all of these were from the dynasty of the Lodhis. And like us that are from Ludhiana, that's actually the history of that is Ludhiana. Ibrahim Lodi becomes king, and he's all he's interested in is drinking, and as in our language you call him sharabi kababi. That was all he was interested in. And what we don't know, and what Bhai Daru Singh ji is saying, that Rai Bular's son, he becomes Ibrahim Lodi's vizier. When they question Ibrahim Lodi, he gets annoyed. He's like, who are you to question me? They four question him, and then his vizier questions him. He arrests all of them. 2 of the sons are bricked alive. So then this relates back to, then we relate that back to Guru Gobind Singh Ji's sons. And then 2 of them are beheaded. And before they are killed, they write a letter to their father, Daulat Khan, and says, we are the Sikh of Guru Nanak. Now it is your responsibility to take revenge. And if you are too old, he actually writes that if you think you are too old now, go to Guru Nanak, he will help you. So Daulat Khan goes running to Guru Nanak, who at that time is with Bhai Lalo. And Bhai Lalo, again, is Tarkhan. And while he's there, it says in Bhai Gurdasi's Warans that at that time Guru Nanak Dev Ji is doing a lot of meditation, hardly eating, doing days and days of meditation at a time. Ratan Singh Pangu says something along the lines of his chonkada, Guru Nanak Dev Ji's chonkada is like a mountain, it's immovable. Daulat Khan comes running to him and says, I need to take revenge on Ibrahim Lodi now. And it's actually Guru Nanak that says, you go to Babur and invite him to take over the kingdom, and I will give him the kingdom. And why I found that interesting is when you go into that first room, it's like, what is preempting that and what is in the minds of the Sikhs? And when we read that text, I think there's an element there is that Guru Nanak Dev Ji is the one that has put this into motion, and we have a sense of responsibility to that. So Bhai Daru Singh Ji, when they're giving them shahidi, when all of these things are giving their shahidi, they have this in the back of their mind, is that all of these Mughal kings that have come, they have been there due to the blessing of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Now Guru Nanak Dev Ji will give us Raj. And it says that Guru Nanak Dev Ji, even though he has given the kingdom to the Babur, he was like, he also has the technique of where he's going to get rid of them as well. And this is what the Khalsa thought of themselves as, is that we are this technique. And when you're going through that exhibition, I was thinking, like, even though this is not spoken about much now, but this was in the psyche of the Sikhs at that time.
Yeah, I think in that exhibition space, I think you're trying to provide a bit of a background and kind of do so. There's only so much you could do in a particular space, but we very quickly are trying to kind of look at the origins of that warrior culture. Where it comes from. Maybe slightly surprising to see a few little elements in there. For example, a painting of Guru Arjan, produced around about the time of Maharaj Ranjit Singh's birth. So that meant you're now already questioning like who these patrons are. It's a very, very fine school of painting, Fanensuk school of painting. But then the Guru Arjan is armed. So that sometimes is like, how often do you see a picture of him with a granth, but also with a sword? Yeah. So typically you might associate the warrior tradition as being from that moment onwards. But then obviously we know that he's also referred to as Arjan Mal. Guru Ramdas is doing wrestling, like that. It isn't coming out of nowhere. I know that remember Nidar Singh used to speak about Guru Nanak, using there's certain elements of Shastra Vidya that turn up in the Janam Sakhis. So Guru Nanak, so well travelled, maybe he'd know some basic self defence. You'd imagine, right? But so in terms of and then I think for me, from a personal perspective, I think is crucial to that storytelling is looking at these historical figures, even if it's the gurus, just to manage it, like understanding the kind of social, political environment in which they live in, and what's going on, so that we can look at this classic story that's been passed down of Sikh-mughal conflict, and actually I'll try and add a bit of nuance to the whole thing. And then because then you understand art is always, some elements of art are always going to be propaganda, like who's producing it, who's a patron, what's going on, and this is shifting and changing over time as people's agendas change as well. But in that, so I think it's interesting, and even in that the Wallace Collection, for example, they have in their collection they have Shah Jahan's dagger that was most likely given to him by Jahangir. And then, you've got Guru a painting of Guru Arjan there, and we can, say to somebody, well, actually, he's, executed under the orders of Jahangir. He's a contemporary, Guru Hargobind is a contemporary of Shah Jahan. They go to battle against each other. And so this links immediately to a very physical object, which is there. But then it's like some small things like, you look at, I'm going to preempt something in a minute, but we were talking about, I know I've seen on some of your previous ones where you do your fun facts. Yeah. Right? It's not so much a fun fact, but something that I tend to do quite often is when I look at, I don't know why, when I look at certain characters, whether in pictures or in histories, I want to work out how old people were at different times. Yeah. Like, I want to quickly place something. Like I said to you, if I said to you Maharaj Ranjit Singh, you're probably going to think about a grey beard. If I say Guru Amar Das or Guru Nanak, you probably think about an older man. What happens when we start thinking about younger people? But a couple of little fun facts for you, which I think change the way in which we think about things. Is, for example, like, I remember learning this later, really long down the line, but you grow up hearing about stories of Guru Gobind Singh Zafarnama. The princes, the Shehzade being executed. Guru Gobind Singh, his arch enemy, Emperor Aurangzeb, and he writes. He writes to Emperor Aurangzeb and says, "Come, meet me. You've done this, whatever." But he's praising his braveries too and his skills as a warrior. But then he writes, and Guru Gobind Singh is in his early 40s. Aurangzeb's almost 90 years old at that time. Wow. Right? Nobody ever knows that. Yeah. Nobody ever realizes that the age gap between them. That or he's at least in his late 80s. Yeah. But I remember even that reading that, coming across that as a first time, going, oh, hang on a second. I'd always imagined them as being proper contemporaries. Yeah. Right. And then you think, okay, well that changes things a little bit. So what is this? What's going on here? And then, but also in the exhibition when we're talking about the execution of, we want to quickly tell people about where this warrior tradition comes from and how it sits alongside a religious, a faith. People don't understand that. Not many instances where the warrior culture is so kind of prominent. But then it's looking at Guru Arjan's execution, and actually also considering how significant or insignificant the Sikhs are at that point. How we know that the Punjab in Ranjit Singh's time is about 10% Sikh. Yeah. So in the Guru's time it's less, right? Yeah. So it's less than 10% Sikh. Also, the population at that time, the population of the extent of the entire Mughal Empire at its peak is probably about 100. We're talking about India now is billions. Then it was 150 million was the population of Mughal India, which was about the same as the population of Europe. Right. So now we're also imagining India differently. We're imagining these interactions, and then finally, part of the reason why, Guru Arjan is executed is the fact that he's given refuge to, I think it's Khusro, who's, Akbar's favourite, but he's Jahangir's son. Jahangir is chasing his own son, right? Yeah. Because in the Mughal Central Asian tradition, what's accepted is that it doesn't just get passed down to the eldest. If you've got 2 or 3 sons, you lot are going to fight it out, and we're going to work out who's the best for the job. Yeah. That's accepted. So then suddenly you're introducing somebody to the idea of actually Guru Arjan's execution. For us, it's a big thing. But maybe for the Mughals, it was a very insignificant event. And Jahangir writes about it as an insignificant event. He says, in his memoirs, there's this guy who's becoming a bit popular. I shut down his shop. Like what else is going on? This is a guy who's chasing his own son. Yeah. Aurangzeb killed his own brothers as well as everybody else. Whatever else he does, and also, he's not Aurangzeb's not a complete tyrant. He's a very highly educated, sophisticated, learned man. So all these little things that I think are really crucial if we're really going to understand the kind of trajectory of it all, is actually to think about what's going on, who these people, what's happening, how insignificant are we, how significant do we become. So I think we will very quickly try and do that. And I know it's really difficult in an exhibition to get that done with a few captions and an audio guide, but there's so much to kind of draw out.
What's your engagement been like with a non-Sikh audience with exhibitions like this.
Yeah. So I mean, we with this exhibition, for example, we picked a character from history. We pick a personality who some objects in the Wallace Collection are connected to, Maharaj Ranjit Singh, and by picking a personality like him, we can look upon like many stories, and those stories might be historical, philosophical, about religion, about noble culture, warrior culture, whatever it is, and many cultures coming together. So we are then able to engage with people on different levels where you want to be. You might be more interested in history than religion, for example. The Sikhs might be wanting to come and get something else from that experience. So I think that's really crucial, is that when you're selecting these objects, first of all, you're looking at the story that you want to tell, and then you're pulling together the objects that best connect those stories and connect to each other. And I think in many ways that's the power of an exhibition like this, is that you can go from one object to another object and connect certain dots throughout the thing. Yeah. And then you're remembering something that you've seen before, which links to something that you're seeing later on. And slowly this story kind of like comes together, and you realise how connected all of this material is. So, as an example, in that first room, there's a painting of pretty much the origin story of Maharaj Ranjit Singh, where you've got this meeting of two groups of people. So you've got Jai Singh Kanhaiya meeting Raja Sansar Chand from Gangra, and it's this interaction at this point where there's a fallout. Jai Singh dies, and Ranjit Singh marries into a bigger confederacy, and Sansar Chand is there young, and then later on in the exhibition, we see a painting of Ranjit Singh's cremation. Yeah. With a sati happening, 4 wives, 7 maidservants being burned alongside him, and one of the wives that is burned is the daughter of that Sansar Chand that you just saw at the beginning of the exhibition. Right, so you kind of like, this is when that first picture comes about, Ranjit Singh's about 5 years old, or he's around about the time of his birth, in fact, 1780. And then later on, you've got this connection, because now you've got this, So little just weaving characters, personalities.
Might be a bit of a nefarious question, but how did the Wallace Collection get some of the Ranjit Singh items?
Yeah, so I think the majority of their Sikh arms and armour, and most of the other arms and armour that they have in the collection, which is amongst the finest in the world, that time in the 19th century, there's people that are collecting. There's people that are collecting, objects from other parts of the empire. The Punjab in 1849 is annexed to the East India Company, and in the 1850s, various objects from the court, either by way of spoils of war or people coming in and buying things or gifts or auction, or from product. The remnants of the auctions. There's auctions that take place in the 1850s, and many of these objects go into the marketplace. Yeah. The Lahore Treasury, the Toshakhana, is broken up, and then these things go out. And the 4th Marquis of Hertford and Richard Wallace, was my father Richard Wallace, they were collecting these objects, and they were collecting objects as works of art, as types of art and craft, looking at what other parts of the world are producing. And then they're also collecting personalities. So a lot of the Sikh arms and armour, it seems that much of it came from one of the best kind of antique dealers of that day, a man called Spitzer, Frederick Spitzer. I think he was Austrian but lived in France, Paris, and he was selling to the Marquis. So the Marquis had acquired some of those objects from him, and then they were exhibited in Paris in the 1860s. But what's really interesting about that is that 2 things. One is that imagine that he is buying things that actually haven't been long produced. So we think about Maharaja Ranjit Singh's sword, and we naturally think about it as being a couple hundred years old, right? Yeah. Well, it might have been 20 years old then.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So these are and many of the other objects in the Arms and Armour Gallery, if they're 19th century, he's basically he's a contemporary modern art collector. Yeah. In some respects.
What was that attraction?
I think there was one was. I mean, he didn't just collect that. They collected, European furniture, European master paintings, French furniture, and they was. I think like any collector, like there was clearly a passion and a love for it. But they were quite special in that the Wallace Collection as a building was basically, it's their house. He lived with the art. Like he lived with it. It was on the walls. He would walk out of his bathroom and step into an armory. His bedroom is covered in pictures. Like, that's the goals there, isn't it? Have to set up your
house.
There's photographs of that as well. So he is, there's clearly a passion and an interest there. But obviously these objects are all aesthetically, like, they're stunning, they're beautiful. So that's how they got that. And the other thing that's interesting about that is within the first month of the show, a friend of mine from Canada, he found in France, coming up for sale, a Sikh shield, and he sent it to me. His name's Sukhbir. He's great. He finds great things for me, and he he sent it to me and says, check this out. Like, it looks like a decent thing. And this Sikh shield was coming up in France, and it was exactly the same workmanship, pretty much, as some of the shields that are in the Wallace Collection. And it's got Sengs on it shooting their matchlocks and gilding the borders. And so I go to France. I managed to buy the shield. The provenance of the shield is that it's also come from Spitzer's collection. So it's also come from the very collection that the other Sikh material was coming from, except it's coming up in 2024. Like, that's interesting. Like, that's interesting that we are... I thought it was really the coincidence, the irony of the fact that we're doing this show at the Wallace Collection, looking at their arms and armour that they bought from, that Wallace or the Marquis bought from Spitzer back then, and we're finding an object now from then too. Like, it's extraordinary, isn't it, really?
Because I was listening to a talk you did with Ramblings, and this was about 3.5 years ago, and I think you were talking about this story that you're telling now. And then there's these coincidences that I guess that are happening. How long does it take to put that story together? Because from that conversation, it's at least 3 years.
About the story of the exhibition?
Yeah. Like, there's this story that you're eventually trying to tell. Like, when does that idea come, and how does that develop over time to the point where we're talking right now, and that exhibition is in the Wallace Collection?
Yeah, so I think typically, depending on what level you want to do an exhibition and where you want to do it, the first thing to bear in mind is that most museum spaces, they'll have their programming, planned in advance by about 3 to 4 years. So they're not. These things take a long time to organise. They need to know what the calendar looks like. Obviously, these are professional institutions that these are proper. So for that reason. So for example, if I thought about an exhibition now as a concept, as an idea, and I pitched to a museum or something, you're probably not going to see that for 3 or 4 years. Wow. That's the sad reality of how quickly these things come about, which is why our SOAS shows, we did one in 2011, 2014, and then 2018.
So even at SOAS, it takes that long.
Yeah, because they have their program in place. You gotta find a slot, and then it takes time to acquire, write the catalogue, get all the permissions, plan the show, all the design, and all those elements. So that's how long that takes. So I think maybe when I spoke to Ramblings, I think we were in the initial phases of kind of talking about it. I'm not even sure if it was kind of, we had the full go ahead then. We might have done. I can't remember now, but that's how long it takes. And I think with the Wallace and coming up with the idea, you want to, like I said, you come up with a concept and an idea which you can tell many stories off that attracts people. So Ranjit Singh, he is Napoleon of the East. That's how his French officers describe him. So because we're also trying to pull in a different audience here, both from the European English audience who may not know who he is, but then also you're trying to attract the Sikhs as well, Punjabis, and yeah. So that's the difficult side of things. That's how much planning these things kind of take.
At that time when you're thinking about this the exhibition and it being the story that you're trying to tell. Did you have all of the pieces at that time that you wanted? Because obviously we know the from the V&A the Maharaj Ranjit Singh's Golden Throne is there, and I think the beauty of that is we're seeing it from 360 now, whereas in the V&A we're only seeing it from a very specific angle.
Yeah, so you are having to basically set a number of things into motion. You can't wait for one kind of definitive kind of answer coming in from someone. You're setting a number of things into motion, and then you're going to carry, and you know that something's going to drop away, something's going to come off, and then eventually you're going to get to where you need to get to. So you've got your date when you need to do your launch. You know, and you understand what your physical space is. You understand, this is the benefit of working with an institution like the Wallace who are experienced, or a publisher that's experienced. You know, well, what is my object count going to be? What is the object count for a space like this to typically help someone navigate a show within 1.5 hours before they get bored and exhausted, and how many people are going to engage with the captions. So you're looking at about 80 to 100 objects. 100 is quite a lot, actually, but we had about 82 individual things. So then now you know. But then you go, well, okay, well, what's the story? What are the sections? How do we do this? And then you think about the different elements. So we've got, Prelude Power, Masters of War, Lahore Bar, that kind of thing. And then you're saying, well, okay, which objects do we know of? Where, both in private collection or museum collections, what's the best possible show that we can do? What can we show people that they've never seen? And borrow what was never been borrowed, because we've got this one opportunity now that might not come around again quickly. So then you start, so actually we started off with about 150 object list. And then you look at that and you keep looking at that and you can come back and you say, well, that can go and that can go, and we need to have that. These 30 are a must, for example. We have to have the Golden Throne from the V&A. Yeah, we have to have the earliest portrait of Ranjit Singh from the British Museum. Do you know what I mean? And, all that kind of thing. Like, we have to have certain things.
What's that process like? Is that difficult to have a conversation with these institutions, or?
It's not, and it's that conversation, because what you do is, all you can do is ask, right? So you then come up with this idea. You have to justify why you want to borrow something. So for me, it was brilliant because it's the Wallace Collection that's asking, and they've got a wonderful museum with a great reputation doing this exciting show. So all the response that we had back from museums was very encouraging. People, and I was really kind of energized by that, because immediately you'd have a response back saying, "Great idea, can't wait to be involved." Royal Armouries, British Museum, British Library, you got our support. We borrow from the Louvre, we borrow from the Palace of Versailles. So they're like, it's the first loan that the Wallace Collection had from the Louvre. And that's the portrait of painting of Ranjit Singh on white horse with the French flag in the background.
That was cool.
Yeah, what a fantastic picture. People, you can walk past that picture in the Louvre, like you wouldn't know where it was, and
now it's the centre stage in that.
So you put those requests out. Some things obviously can't come off for various reasons, which you can't predict, and then you've got to start to fill gaps with your substitutes in that environment. Before it opens to the public, all the critics come in, right?
Yeah.
So we've got beforehand, in the early days, the critics come in, and then they write about the show and see what they think, and then I'm trying to speak to some people who want to learn more about it and are fascinated by it, and some people they might feel as if they know everything already, so they want to be spoken about it, and then you just got to leave it and see what they come up with. And it's all good, because you want to hear what people feel and think. It's all good and well kind of me being really happy with it, but unless it's actually hitting the mark and someone's engaging with it, then you can
and you talked about being energized. Do you feel like it's the right time now, because now there's maybe social media and the presence that you have on social media, that you get that instant response outside of exhibitions?
Yeah, I think it's always. I think we just simply. I don't actually kind of have the luxury to kind of look at this stuff and say, well, actually, I want to hold something back. I'm going to wait to put it out later on. Like, we're just trying to, because the timelines are so extended anyway. You're always just trying to work out when it comes out. It comes out. Social media has definitely changed things. I've noticed just in the last 6, I don't have a huge following or presence or anything, but in the last 6 years, even since our last SOAS show, how the marketing around something has changed so much. I remember when we did a video trailer. That was the first thing to go out, was the video trailer that was released for this exhibition. Gurbaksh Matharu did the composition for it, and we had the images moving and engaging, changing. And that was the first, that's the thing that you kind of release, and that just went a bit crazy. Like the amount of times that was being shared on, and the Wallace Collection were emailing me saying like, I'm most engaged with video ever, like on the thing.
Yeah, my teacher from primary school, so I was very much into art. You mentioned Robert Hales, and this teacher was similar for me as well. Like they would call me out, and as soon as the exhibition went live, like we was already speaking about it, my teacher from secondary school has messaged me and saying, "Oh, have you seen this exhibition?" I was thinking, "Wow, that's insane!" That was the first time that had ever happened.
I knew it was a success when someone messaged me and said, "Have you heard about this exhibition?" and I thought, well,
I'll check it out.
I might go down there. Yeah, no, it's brilliant.
There's you've touched upon senses, right? So when you walk in there, you're talking about, the Sikh Guru's times, and then you walk around and you see Maharaj Ranjit Singh's times, and then there's an area, and there's curated music for each piece that you've done through the audio piece. One thing that I found fascinating, which we didn't actually experience, is when you go upstairs to the restaurant, you actually curated food there as well, didn't you?
Yeah, so I did actually have a lot of input with that. We actually thought about we just thought about all the different things. Like I mean, it's, you work from what you want from an ideal perspective, right? So what we're trying to do, we're trying to create an environment where we can transport you somewhere. Like if you're going to add the most amount, make it as authentic as possible, just to try and get us into that space, right?
Wait, so hang on, are you telling me that there were olive pronto on that menu and we missed out?
No.
Was it like the favourite food of Maharaj Ranjit Singh?
well, to be honest with you, I can't take any credit for that, because I didn't have a lot of input into that menu. But it's nice that they wanted to even explore that.
That's amazing.
Because because food actually, interestingly, is the one thing that, it's the last thing to disappear. Like as traditions change, your language might disappear, your dress might disappear, but immigrant communities, we keep our food with us. Like your mum still comes from India with her belna kind of in her bag.
That's to beat you with, though.
That's true actually. Dual purpose.
But if we deep dive a little bit into the music aspect, because I don't know, you in the previous exhibitions you've done, I'm going to assume, was the music a part of that, or is this the first time you've explored that?
So in fact, I think for GT, for Golden Temple exhibition in 2011, I think the highlight of that show was the fact that we had Bhai come over from
amazing, yeah.
We had Bhai come over from Pakistan, and do some Geetan for us, because that show was all about looking at the kind of Harmandir Sahib kind of changing over the course of time, and obviously an aspect of that was looking at the kind of the changing of kind of musical traditions, and also you couldn't speak about Harmandir Sahib without talking about inclusivity and the melting pot of Amritsar at the time, and because you were confronted by it throughout all the images, right? So then to suddenly had to have this beautiful moment. I remember that auditorium was fully packed.
There was people sitting on the
floor, the aisles. We were crammed in, and it was an emotional experience. I remember, and so that was the first time. And music, obviously, for all of us, like it's the vehicle, isn't it? Like, why would you speak about something when you can sing it? So, like, I think that's that was always been crucial, and music played an important part of my life growing up. And then, so we understood the importance of that. And then for this show, we had this audio guide that we've done for the show in English and in Punjabi. We wanted some music for that, and it was at that point, probably a few months before the show, that I kind of sat down with Gurbaksh Singh Matharu, who I think I'd met him once physically, but I just resonated with him. And kind of had seen and heard some of his work. And the one meeting with him, I just really wanted to work with him, and I just really had a sense of his nature and his character just from this one little meeting, that he was the person that I needed to work with. And so I just approached him and just said, "Look, would you be interested?" this is what we'd love to explore. And I kind of just said to the museum, look, you know, we're going to go and do this off our own back, but we think it's important to do. And I remember we sat in the Wallace Collection restaurant, and I had, you know, I met Gurbaksh there, and I had my laptop, and I said, look, I'm going to give you like a preview of what's going to be in the show, but if I show it to you section by section, and if I can tell you the story of the section, can you give me the rug? Like, if I tell you what I think the mood should be for that space, do you reckon you can give us a mood if I give you the object? And then I said, I'm not musical, but then I'll just send these images to you. Now that you know the story and these images, let's see what comes back from it, you know. And he was like, yeah, I can do that. Like, I'm well up for that. Like, he's, you know, extremely confident. And then and on every occasion, like and then there's this kind of delay, because I don't know what he's doing. He's probably feeling nervous about what he's going to produce and send to me, and I knew it was going to be good for what's going to come back from him. But you know, when he finally sends it back, it's like, and I remember writing to him, I said, like, you've just given me everything that I dreamed about. Like, you know, it's like, it wasn't even about exceeding expectations. Like, this is exactly what I felt, and that was really important for us, because what we were trying to do with that music, one is that you know, we're transcending the language barrier. We're kind of giving you a feeling, you know. So on the audio guide, you can experience each section of the exhibition just with 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes of music, and that's what we're trying to do. But then also add this element of authenticity. Nothing in that show, I couldn't have anything in that show kind of being an off-the-shelf thing.
Yeah, it felt bespoke.
Yeah, so even like the patterns in the Jali screens in the show, they're fair enough, they're like fairly kind of generic patterns, but equally they are patterns that are from Huzuri Bagh in Lahore when Ranjit Singh takes the Kohinoor, you know, things like that. So, and nobody knows that, but I know that.
Yeah,
and that's what's like, from, do you know what I mean? So it's not even to tell somebody that, but it needs to be.
Authenticity.
Like, you need to have that, and so that's why his music was really important. Even in the exhibition space, you know, you can hear music in the exhibition space, and even that, for example, you know, we're thinking about music in an exhibition space. Now, if music in an exhibition space is a couple of minutes long, then you're basically going to drive the security staff mad, because it becomes like, it's torturous, like to have something on a loop for 2 minutes, and your station, you might be there 3-4 hours a day, right? Equally, if you're navigating that space as a visitor and you're there for 15-20 minutes and you've had that music 6-7 times, so that's not a nice experience, right? And so we then thought, I said, right, you know, Gurbaksh, we sat down and said, Gurbaksh, one more thing, can we, this space, I reckon is going to be about 15 minutes from someone to walk through this part of this exhibition. Can you give us some music that reflects this, but that can last 15 minutes, so that they never hear it twice, and when it does come back round, you obviously haven't remembered it.
Yeah.
And he produced a piece of music that was 19 minutes. Wow. You know, so it's like, so it's great. So little, just small things like that. But
for me, I think when going through that exhibition, something that having a conversation with you afterwards makes it stand out now a bit more was the fact that, one, you called out the fact that, you know, Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji's Raj was a melting pot of different cultures, and then what you managed to accomplish with that exhibition was also something similar, because I remember there being a picture, and on each corner there was Arabic writing, and it wasn't anything I can translate or read, but there was somebody there from Pakistan, and you know, we were both drawn in by the picture and started having a conversation. She could recognise that I was a Singh, obviously with the way that I look, and then I had no idea that they were from Pakistan, and then having a conversation about the artwork, was like, can you translate that? And then it turned out to be praise of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and they were on horseback, and it from somebody that's Arabic, right? And it brought us two together for that, you know, one moment. Do you have an intention or an aim for each exhibition? Is it to draw people in, inspire, or is it to leave an impression?
I think if I went in with that intention, I think actually it's a problem. So I kind of stay away from that. I don't view that exhibition space to say, well, actually, what is it that I want to really push and get across? You know, what is it that I personally want to kind of push in terms of some sort of agenda? Like, and what happens, what you experienced, actually is very easy for us to kind of create or bring about, because all I was doing was going, well, where's the best picture of Ranjit Singh that reflects this part of so that picture that you're talking about, painted by Imam Bakhsh Lahori, but commissioned by a Frenchman, right? Which then feeds into the other art which is being produced by the French of Ranjit Singh. It just so happens that obviously Persian is the court language and the couplets are in Persian. And so we don't really need to do very much. I don't need to orchestrate or kind of direct that. And that's the beauty of it. Like, so someone can say, well, that'd be intentional, like you would pick that one up. No, actually, that's the one that was commissioned, you know, patronised by General Kaur and done by Imam Bakhsh Lahori, and this is Ranjit Singh, is one of the finest pictures of him, and it's connected to one in the Royal Collection, all that kind of stuff. There you go, let's just put it out. And then the rest of it is just what comes from it.
I love the fact that I gave you like such a vague description of what the picture was, but you knew instantly what it was, what I was talking about. You obviously have such an intimate relationship with these artifacts. You know, what maybe we skipped over it at the beginning, but what actually drew you to starting this collection?
I might have mentioned this to you before, but like, you know, I kind of questioned how much power do we have to actually nurture something? You know, like, you know, a parent's kind of constant struggle, isn't it? Is like to nurture their child to be something, and then eventually you kind of submit to the fact that they're just going to be what they're going to be, right? So, and actually, like you just, you know,
Yeah,
all
just
of us
facilitating something.
Yeah, and all of us are just kind of eventually, hopefully, we're going to be happier and more content once we realise who we actually just are, as opposed to what we can actually strive to be. You know, so like I don't. So I'm not sure actually whether that was. There's certain parts of kind of the collecting aspect I think that I look at and I try and work out just where those traits come from, and those traits might not necessarily come from healthy places. You know, the collecting, you know, being covetous and needing to have something, own something, that might not necessarily come from a healthy place. The result of it now might be really good and interesting, but as something, you know, where does that come from? That's a completely different podcast. I think we're going to delve into that. But
so
like,
that's a therapy podcast that is starting soon.
I've got a shares lounge so you could just
let's do that one. It's interesting because, you know, I met someone the other day, yesterday, and we were having this conversation about this, and I did a talk on collecting and kind of collecting stories at the Wallace Collection yesterday. And this man comes up to me after, and he's like, you know, I'm a bit of a collector, and he said, it's interesting, isn't it? He said, why people collect, and you know what, you know, he said we're odd people, aren't we? I said, yeah, we are odd people, you know. And he said, yeah, and it's very, really poignant, profound kind of moment that we were left in a bit of silence. He said to me, yeah, he goes, he said, you know, the art, he said, it doesn't hurt you. Like he said, you know. And it made me think that he said, you know, we collect things. I've collected things. He said they've never hurt me. And I thought, where's it coming from with him? Yeah. Like he, and then we, you know, later on, there's a moment of silence, and he was like, there was some stability in these works of art that he was picking up over the course of time, and they were his friends. You know, we had there was a talk in the actual thing yesterday where this artist, this collector, talks about these being surrounded by his friends all the time because he's got these pictures on the wall. So it was quite interesting, like thinking about that. So going back to what you're saying, like I think it was probably always there in me, and then it slowly. And I was inspired. Like I'm gonna have to give a lot of credit to like mentors. I think we all have mentors. We all have people that we see and look up to. And you know, for me growing up, that was my cousin Baranjit, like in this area, and nothing was, and all he was, when I look back at it now, like he was just being himself, and I was observing, right? It wasn't as if you should do this, you should do that, you should do this. But what I had the benefit of being is, if we're lucky enough to ever be around the company of somebody who's passionate about something.
Yeah. Oh mate, if you ever met Paramjit, the guy he just comes out of himself when he's talking about something, and the way that he walked me around the GT 1588 exhibition, it'll just, I will, I can't even explain it because every piece was like, you know what, this is what happened in that, this is what was going on in that piece. Look at like you mentioned, you've got the Darbar Sahib picture at the Ranjit Singh, but he was talking about an earlier photograph where there's an Udasi Sadhu there. But I don't think it wasn't at that. Was it at GT 1588?
Probably, or it might have been in catalogue at least.
I think he was in the catalogue and he was talking about that. And he goes, look at this. He goes, do you see this now?
Yeah.
And it's true. He goes, but that character, I grew up around these characters. I wasn't like close with them, but I saw them, and they were always those inspirational characters you think, you know what, these guys know a thing or two, and you just you gravitate towards them.
Exactly, and that's what that is. So I think, and then it just changed. It kind of, so I'm exposed to that. That then maybe not ignite something in me, but like maybe something was already there deep, and then it suddenly brings it out, and then and then I'm getting some nourishment from it.
Do you think? And we spoke about this briefly when we spoke at the Wallace Collection. When you talk in such detail about a character from history, you described how Ranjit Singh's life was filled with struggle, but that enabled him to become a stronger leader in his capacity for the Northern Indian region. Do you draw inspiration from that as a parent?
Absolutely, it's important. Like, what is it? Where do we get our growth from? The growth is obviously coming from challenging yourself to the point of possible failure, and then grafting and working, and then overcoming that thing, and then you come out of that thing sharper, smarter, more experienced, right? So I think the struggle. I think is crucial. Also, I think it's that. You can have different ways of looking at that struggle, but that struggle in some ways is the kind of the discipline, or like the work ethic, which actually is the thing. Do you know what I mean? It's not the product. What do we value? It's not the product that comes out at the end of it. It's the mint. It's the sweating and the toiling is actually the fun bit. But also that's the bit where you can feel most alive. Right. Yeah. So that is the thing that you need. I wouldn't. So for example, and in this kind of, it's going to tie into what you said a moment ago, because it's like that. How do we engineer? How do we engineer an environment for growth? So, for example, with the kids, for example, the worst thing that I can do is to protect them and to spoon feed them, right? And I want to, ensure that they, as much as I can, that they don't have something. So trauma is a problem. Like something breaks,
and that's the natural perception, isn't it? That every parent wants a better life or wants to do better than what they had.
Yeah.
But so when you mentioned that being like you mentioned that, and I thought that's such a contrast to what the norm people think is.
Yeah. I mean, I remember having years and years ago. I remember I think before. I think my brother's 8 years older than me. He had kids then, but I didn't. And then. And I remember saying to him once we sat down, I said to him, look, I said our life growing up was pretty challenging, pretty tricky. Like we came out the other end pretty well. Like, all right, so but now, how are we gonna make their life difficult?
That was the wording. That was the wording.
How are we gonna do that? Like, how are we gonna? Whoa! How are you gonna make your kids? Like I was saying to my brother, how are you gonna make your kid's life difficult enough? It doesn't need to be quite difficult. You don't break them. But the worst thing you can do is make it easy. Like we're the product of. We understand the struggle is the thing. That's the thing that you need to go towards rather than to kind of shy away from. And I think going back to how that connects to what you're saying is there's different types of collectors. I suppose I collected with difficulty. Nobody was a collector in the family. There was no art that was inherited. Nobody had any money. We were 7 of us in a terraced house in Slough. All that kind of stuff. And this is not just my story. It's a common immigrant family story. We weren't anything special, but but collecting is not on the list of things to do, is it? Really? It's not really
surviving. Is probably
do you know what I mean? Nobody is ever thinking that that's going to happen. And this is also interesting because it's about a mindset, isn't it? Because
was it back then that Dr. Barnau engineer?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I remember, like, you know, I became an optometrist not because I was passionate about optometry. Like, it was about getting a job, wasn't it? At the end of it, so it was. So I think, but what's interesting out of that is that despite that, I was fortunate enough to kind of fall into this, but you can be conditioned into thinking that world isn't for you because you have an idea or a perception has been put out there of what an art collector is. Right? True. So an art collector. So what are you going to think of? I think about even I know.
Robert Hales looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and even he's interesting because actually he grew up in a council house. Oh my God, yeah. Right in Essex, and so he's also broken the mold. But but an art collector is inherited wealth, house in London, house in the country, older, you know, maybe a tweed suit or something, whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? So. Yeah, so then, but then you actually just break down and actually look into the market and you understand what it is. And but tying in what you were saying before, I wasn't a checkbook collector growing up, and actually I'm so glad that I wasn't because that's where the education was. The education was in how you're going to stretch your £100 to buy two things.
For somebody like me, you know, who never really grew up around art like the way that these guys did, if you said what is a collector, my first connection would be Indiana Jones. Like, you know, you're going out treasure hunting. Do you know what I mean?
Some of it's a bit like that. Yeah. I mean, I think someone once called me Indian Jones, and
relating this, can you tell that story about when you meet Robert Hales for the first time?
Yeah. So Robert Hales is just to give you background. Robert Hales is he is the kind of the go-to man in Indian arms and armour, Asian arms and armour kind of circles. He used to deal and have a shop in Notting Hill, Kensington Church Street for years and years, and he still is around, and he's such a lovely guy. But he is the guy. And you know, buying in, let me give you an origin story for him. He, just to put it into perspective, I think in 1966, he drove to India.
Wow!
Right, so he drove to India from London. Yeah, he was. I think at that time he's in his 20s, early 20s. Him and a friend, camper van type thing.
What an adventure!
Drive across, go to India. Comes back with a few antiques. Sells them here and realises, hang on a second, there might be a bit of a business in this. But anyway, so he starts. But can you imagine, like in the 60s, doing that and what you're going to experience? But he, but I, you know, at the age of, I think I was 18, when I bought my first piece, and I went up to myself, my brother, and my older sister. I'm the youngest of five, and my sister wanted to go to this. I remember it was Mega Mela, the NEC. Birmingham, and it's just like, I don't know, Shah Rukh Khan was going to be in town or something like that, right?
Mega Midler.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah, and look, I'd probably find out exactly what the dates are, you know, like it's like, no, and basically she goes and we're going with her, she goes, "Oh, come with me." We get to the front door of this thing, and Mega Miller's on the right hand side, and right opposite is like some antique fair, right? So I can't remember which one. I think it was the Antiques Roadshow fair or something like that, big fair. We sat outside, and me and my brother go, "You know what? You go that way, we'll go this way. See you back here in 2 hours. Like, should we do that? You know, you go and see Shah Rukh. We're gonna go in here." And so we end up going through, and then we basically going through. And I remember seeing this one little knife, and we basically bought this knife. My brother I needed 60 quid, and I'm convincing my brother. He's 8 years older than me. And then Brandon told me about this dealer Robert Hales in Kensington Church Street, and I used to go on Saturdays to Portobello Road, and then go down to Kensington Church Street, and then just look through his little window and look at his stuff. And one day I go into his shop, and I've young Sikh, late teens, arms and armour. That's the thing that attracts you first.
Yeah, 100%.
My sister made a little scabbard for it. I had it on a little belt. I tied it in, and all that, the stuff. And so I'm dressed up. Anyway, I go into his shop, and basically I lift up my. I said, excuse me. I said, I'm looking. I see. He said, I'm. Have you got? Quite proudly, I lifted up my jumper. I said, have you got anything like this?
Yeah.
For sale, like. And he basically looks at me and he says, "I'm sorry, young man." He said, "I don't deal in junk."
Whoa, okay.
And he kind of laughs. And first of all, I'm like, bloody, oh my God, junk, you know, like. And he goes, let me explain to you why I'm calling it that. And he basically explains that it's made for the tourist market. It is old, but it's about 100 years old at that time. You know, it's not real jade, it's, you know, faux jade, and it's not real Damascus, it's faux Damascus, and actually it was never an intentional weapon for anybody.
Right.
This is something that you would have bought back in the day at a tourist market. But it's got age.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, thank you. So I've just had an education. And, you know, and then he starts showing me things. And this is, I think, what's really, you know, beautiful about those kind of relationships is that I was young. He must have been in his 60s, or maybe about 60, and I'm, you know, approaching 20 or whatever. And he was just so generous with his knowledge. I wasn't threatening to anybody. I was naturally inquisitive. And here I am in Notting Hill having a conversation. I've probably got like 50 quid on me or something like that, hoping to find something, you know. And he's heading to museums. Do you know what I mean? So I'm you know, like the pieces that I probably saw then are probably now in museums, you know. And he's just so generous. And he's always been generous, like, with his knowledge. And then he says to me, he said, look, let me give you some advice. He said, if you've got £1,000 to spend, he says, don't buy 5 things for 200 quid.
Okay.
He said, buy one thing for £1,000, right? He goes, trust me, like that's what you do, because don't panic, like it will come round again. Wow. Don't be so eager to hoover up anything that you can find. Buy the best that you can buy with the money that you have to spend. And I went back home and I remember going, like, I'd bought a few things by then, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, you know what, I need to sell all the things that I'd bought that I thought I might keep.
Wow.
I kept one thing, and I told you I kept 2 things at that time, including this knife, which I still got, because I then knew that I'm never gonna get anywhere.
Yeah.
If it's quality that I want, unless I really push it. And then that's how that started too. So that was always the formula.
You then visit Pakistan at some point.
A group of us went to Pakistan. So myself, Amandeep Madra, Paramjeet, a couple of other friends who then met us there. And we were going with another great filmmaker friend of ours called Nav Kandola. And Nav Kandola, he's amazing. And then we went, and he was doing a film. He was doing filming out there for a documentary on Balwani, on traditional Punjabi wrestling.
Did that ever come out?
I think it did. It's on. It might be on Vimeo or something like that. But it did. There was something. Yeah. What you need to watch if you're going to watch one of Nav Kandola's, sorry, a little bit of an aside here, is one that he did called Rami for England. But I won't say anything more. But Rami for England.
Okay.
Just check that out. It's a masterpiece for what it is, but completely unrelated. It's just that I've got to recommend that. But anyway, so we were out there, and you know, I'm sort of mid-20s, and then part of this trip is that we are trying to go kind of off the beaten track, and so we're visiting these wrestling akhade. We've got a few contacts in Lahore, one of whom was a descendant of one of Ranjit Singh's ministers, one of the Fakir brothers. He came to the exhibition, Fakir Jazuddin. He gave a talk recently on Shurf, the paintings of Shurf. Anyway, so we've got a few contacts, and then a part of that process was us kind of going to the Lahore Museum, and just so you know, like the Lahore Museum is, you know, pre-partition. This is where, you know, this was the museum of Punjab, right? And when partition happens, the contents are now having to very quickly be, like, it has to be decided, like, what is Sikh, what is Muslim, what is Hindu, what needs to move. And this is how the Chandigarh Museum of Fine Art gets formed. Right, so much of the, you know, contents are coming from what's deemed to be of Sikh and Hindu interest that needs to go east. Right, and this is like
it was artifacts as well.
Complete, and it's a complete disaster because there are objects in that. Much would have been lost. Much is people don't. Not everything's been identified. Right, there are necklaces in that collection that where they couldn't decide, they split them and sent half one way and half the other way. Right, so this is the kind of albums then being broken up because when you have those pictures, we'll keep these. So you now got half, we got half. Right, so this is what's happening to the artifacts that are in the museum. So then obviously we know that, and Fakir Jazuddin, who I just mentioned, I think in the late 70s, I think it's 1979, he wrote a book which he wrote 2 books. One is European Portraits of the Sikhs, which is this in the 70s he wrote these books, right? And then also he's looking at Bahari and Sikh paintings in the Lahore Museum. So obviously not everything did leave, right? So in there are paintings of Sikhs that we know that are still in Lahore. So we then went to Lahore, and I remember Amandeep and I kind of like befriended the curator, and then we're being shown going through picture by picture, and that's when that painting of Satguru Ram Singh was found, painted by Geher Singh, probably the artist. Not Geher Singh, Kapoor Singh, and inscribed. So that was.
What's Kapoor Singh's history? Which school was he from?
He's also from the Punjabi Lahori kind of school of painting. He paints in different medium, like he in Pursuit of Empire, you'll see some other pictures of his. So there's some other. In fact, you'll notice. I think that Ramblings is his avatar.
Yeah.
Right, that's a Nahang. That's from that book of Akali Fulla Singh, painted by Kapoor Singh. So this is Kapoor Singh. Yeah. So this is in. I got that picture of, which is inscribed Kukka Sikh.
Yeah.
That is also a Kapoor Singh picture. So there's 52 portraits in that series, like portraits, which then later on he works up into bigger scenes and stuff. So that's when that picture came about. But also they had other pictures, other paintings, other portraits, Hari Singh Nalwar, people like that, like the characters that are, not many people are aware that these pictures are there sitting in Lahore. And I think basically off the back of that, I think although I've been to Bani Sahib, it was, I think it was Nidara Singh, who then presented like a copy of that picture, just to say, look, this has been discovered recently.
And that was taken to Bani Sahib, and I think Rishpal Baji was there. And when I spoke to them about this, they said that Sadhguru Jagjit Singh Ji said that it wasn't depicted of Sadhguru Ram Singh.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting. Even if it is a depiction and it is associated, that's still important, I think.
Yeah. Because essentially,
in terms of history.
Yeah, I think what we're looking for the earliest pictures that we can find, right? And then also one is you're looking for the earliest pictures that you can find and thinking about under what circumstances they're produced. But equally, what we also have to do is then look at any other pictures that we are looking at in the modern day, and also tracing them back and working out when were they produced and for what reason. Yeah. Because those pictures, much like a Sobha Singh painting of Guru Nanak, for example, they can become synonymous with truth, right? And that's the challenge. And suddenly you are. I'm not saying this is the case with that portrait, but like in many other pictures, we are then challenged by something to say, well, actually, this is just made me think about everything that I've accepted up until this point.
If you go to the end of the exhibition, there's a room. What did you title the last?
Legacies.
The Legacies. So Legacies is where there's a huge portrait, which has always stood out to me as soon as you put it out on Instagram at the beginning, because they look like Namtari guys, right?
Bhai Maharaj Singh is mentioned by Guru Ram Singh as somebody that they respect. They mention in the Hukamname that and Guru Ram Singh Ji says, "Pehlan Sikhan di kirpa Baba Bir Singh te hoyi, fir Bhai Maharaj Singh te hoyi, hun Sikhan di kirpa mere upar hai." So there's, which Guru Ram Singh is saying that this lineage of fighting against the British. Okay. Unfortunately, I know you can put a light on this, unfortunately then they are one of the first people to be exiled as well. And they're sent to Calcutta. And I think here it's saying around November 1850 they are being painted.
Yeah, so by Maharaj Singh, as you say, other names, and that's one of his kind of like his kind of given names. We know that, as you say, he's one of the first prisoners to be exiled from British India, first Sikh in Singapore as a result of that, and that he's in agitation and kind of like he's a rebel leader who very much probably inspired by the fact that his guru, I suppose in many ways, Baba Bir Singh Aurangabad, has come into conflict with the forces of Raja Hira Singh, who was the boy on the front of the of the cover of the catalogue there, and his death, spurs by Maharaj Singh on. So he wants to help the cause in Lahore as it's evolving, changing direction. And then he's this huge price put on his head. And when he's finally captured in 1849, at the time of the Anglo-Sikh Wars, end of the Anglo-Sikh Wars, which is also the same time that we see our earliest photographs, not just earliest photographs of the Sikhs, but earliest Indian photographs coming from that time. Those are the earliest photographs, right, by John McCosh. And it's that time to make you think that maybe there'd be a photograph of him potentially too. Right, there's a photograph of Dalip Singh and Diwan Mool Raj and
as in
Bikram Singh Bedi.
Hira Singh.
No, I was thinking that who knows whether there might have been a photograph by Maharaj taken at that time. Why not? Like he's a big figure in that time, and but anyway, he's then Karak Singh obviously has the misfortune of being with him. In the exhibition, we've managed to reunite both the portrait that's done of him when he's in prison, imprisoned in Calcutta. The artist Colesworthy Grant is commissioned by Dalhousie to take his likeness, and then these objects that we borrowed from the British Library, those are the objects that he's captured with. But it's interesting that Dalhousie, he keeps that picture, like that is his trophy, like that's his. That was still hanging up 10 years ago in his estate in Scotland. Wow. And the correspondence showed that by Maharaj Singh, he's 1850. He's November 1850. That picture's dated. That's when it's done in Calcutta. Then he's exiled, and within about 5-6 years, 1856, he dies in solitary confinement. There's correspondence saying how they want him to get some daylight. He's not doing very well, and Dalhousie denies the daylight, and he eventually goes blind, and he develops horrible cancer of the throat, and he dies under horrific circumstances. And how important must he have been for him to have been exiled from British India? Like that tells you so much about how much of a threat he was. Who else is being exiled? Rani Jindal's being exiled. He's being exiled. Dalip Singh's being removed. So that's the background to the picture. But there's also some interesting detail in when you look at the accounts that Colesworthy Grant leaves about, and it's similar to how there's a sketch of Rani Jindal in the exhibition by George Richmond, where they write about how difficult it is to paint or draw these characters. So it's quite similar stories, in fact, because it's like, well, they don't talk to us, they don't look at us, they don't engage with us. Like, a lot of these artists, they need to engage with you so they can get your best likeness. And if you're being miserable about it, it makes it difficult. So, and he writes about how, by Maharaj saying, he says he hardly, he doesn't look at me, he sits in the corner, cross-legged, facing the wall, doing his meditation. I hear the murmur of his meditation, I hear the clanging of his chain, And he said, but he says Karak Singh, he's a bit feisty, he's a bit more talkative, but he's a bit fiery, so. So then now you've got this other bit of information, haven't you, about how that portrait is actually coming about. And he's really reluctant, to be seen, he knows what's about to happen to them. They know they're about to be exiled. And so it's interesting because now you're bringing all that information together, and I suppose it's going to lead to your next...
to the next question. So I was always drawn to that painting. But then when anybody who ever looks into Bhai Maharaj Singh, there's another photograph that you will come across. And here you can see obviously the ages aren't matching up because there we're saying around, what was it, around 56?
56, he's supposed to have died,
he's supposed to have died, and it's a horrific death. But here we see an older Sikh gentleman, and you can tell he's seen some action.
Exactly.
So he's got the chakras and he's got the slaughter in his hand.
As a standalone, he has presence, doesn't he?
Yeah. So,
and it's a wonderful portrait, and he's clearly a somebody.
Yes.
Like the question is how?
Yeah.
And
this
why,
is 1870s. So
this is the thing. So nobody ever put a date to this before. They hadn't thought about it.
Right.
So this date suddenly appeared now because there's been conversations about it. But in fact, I remember actually, Brahmjit and I were actually in Singapore, and this is post the last exhibition. We went out there and I did a talk on various things, and then one of the things, obviously, like, you know, by Maharaj Singh, Outroom Jail and Outroom Road, whatever, like, he's highly regarded, highly revered. And I remember I was talking, I was just saying, Brahmjit saying, like, why is no one like looking at this? How did this possibly add up? Like by this point, so I've got two other pictures of Bhai Maharaj Singh, right? Okay. Which are one is an ivory portrait on ivory, and then another one is actually in the book In Pursuit of Empire, where you see him, because we know he's a Jedlah of Baba Bir Singh, and he's there. And then we also know that there's a wonderful painting in the Kapani collection which shows Baba Bir Singh in a langar kind of setting, and then Bhai Maharaj is there. So there's certain, you know, style iconography that always helps you identify Bhai Maharaj Singh, because he has, he's quite slim, he's always dressed in white, he has a white bug, he has a mala, like you can pick him out after a while. And then simply just looking at it and saying, well, actually knowing photography, like this doesn't look like a photograph. First and foremost, what's the detective work here is like, you know, either, so he's looking at it saying, well, actually, for it to be, we know that it has to be pre-1856, right? Now, pre-1856 for a photograph of a Punjabi is extremely rare. Right, so I think the earliest photographs of the Golden Temple exist from about that time. In the exhibition, there's a photograph from the Indian Mutiny time, 1857. Right, these are amongst the. To be taken. Yeah, and these are early. Photography has not been around. It's been around in India for like 8 years. So the earliest photographs are those really grainy photographs from the Anglo-Sikh Wars, and they date from 1848-49. So. It has to be 1856 or earlier, right?
Yeah, according.
Okay, now he's fully armed, right? So he's fully armed in this photograph. So that's the first thing. So he's fully armed. Okay, so that now you're obviously assuming that he hasn't been caught, and he hasn't gone to Calcutta. He hasn't gone to Singapore, right? No one's arming him in Singapore for a photograph, are they? Right. So what's happening here? And then that's another aspect. And then the final aspect is, well, how old is he in this photograph? But, you know, from a photographic kind of sense, you can look at this photograph and it looks like a photograph from the 1870s. That's what it looks like. You know, so if you know the photograph of the Nahang Mad Eyes, that's 1865.
Did you guys call him Mad Eyes?
Brahmjit called him Mad Eyes. And it's just that.
True,
it's just that. That is. As an aside, that's one of the best photographs ever, in my opinion, in terms of a photograph.
Beautiful.
Portrait. 1865.
Yeah,
so
beautiful.
That shows you, if that's 1865,
and that's a brilliant photo,
right? Yeah. So this style of photography, the capture, this has to be around about that time or probably later, right? Mm-hmm. But it obviously isn't adding up, is it? No. So, like, because we know that one of his last likenesses is probably the painting that's in the exhibition. He's being painted while he's in prison. Yeah. Like he's not going to be. He's in chains. He doesn't have weapons, right?
Yeah. You can
so then that kind of, you know, we're not finding any answers here, but it's just a matter of, it's all detective work, isn't it? Yeah. Because what do we all want? Everybody just wants to know what the actual story is, don't they?
Yeah.
And want to know what the likeness is. And obviously, I don't think it's that many people. I feel my take on it is that it's not that many people have kind of are ignoring this fact. I actually just don't think many people thought about it.
Yeah.
I think many people, when they saw this photograph, you just accept it.
Yeah, it's the same thing as Sobha Singh's painting.
Yeah,
when you go into someone's house, you know that it's a Guru Nanak painting.
But then the next thing is, well, actually, when you do then think about it, how do then you react to it? That's interesting. Yeah. How do you react to the fact that he's clearly, you know, my friend, I keep mentioning him, Robert Hales, he's 80 years old, my friend, and he looks far better than he does there. He's definitely 80 plus, isn't he? Probably, like I'd imagine, like 85. Like he's got to be old, isn't he? He's obviously, though he looks like he was once strong, straight back, and now he's, you know. So then the question is, okay, then just simply on the fact it can't be. It doesn't add up to who we think Bhai Maharaj was. So that the first thing someone would say to you, well, that then isn't him, right? But there's other possibilities, aren't there? Because then you'd look at that and say, well, if it's not him, then who is it, right? Or, and I think this is what we come to, like, or is it him? In which case, if it is him, and then this is someone in their 80s or 90s, and it is from the 1870s, then who went to Singapore? That's where it gets a bit interesting and a bit chilling. And then, who's in that painting? That was in thing, because they both can't be true. So what's happening? So someone needs to have an explanation for it. And as far as I worked on this the documentary that was done by Upneet Kaur in Singapore, they touch upon this a little bit. No one's really fully going into detail.
The one
but
that Madra was on.
Yeah. So they, and I think the family that says that this is him, that's what they just tell you. But what what it's like. You're doing some research, and somebody says, "Well, look, this is just the photograph we've had. We've always been. I was told this by my previous. They were told about this is him." But this is the question, isn't it? Is we have to look at this critically and look at
with some of the work that you do. A lot of these artifacts have a sacred or a religious connotation. How do you do your due diligence, or how do you separate the two, or do you kind of let the artifact talk for itself?
I think. What is it to do apart from let the artifact talk? You find as much information as you could possibly find out about something, and even at the end of this, I don't have an answer. But what we do have, I think we're legitimately we all have some questions just by doing some simple maths. Right, but do you know what I mean? And but then also what you're doing, you're looking at, because there's other paintings of Bhai Maharaj that exist, for example. So there's the three that I've got. There's we know that he's in the Kapani painting, but then we also see him on in certain murals, certain frescoes, and he always looks a particular age, or he always looks a certain age compared to whoever he's with. So then I remember looking at it and going, well, okay, we know we've got these two paintings of him with Bir Singh. Very simply, he looks younger than Bir Singh in these paintings, right? And then you think, okay, well, he's a Jella of Bir Singh, so we can also probably assume that he's younger. Not all Jella are younger than their gurus, but let's assume that he is. And then you look at it and go, okay, but we know that Bir Singh is first in Ranjit Singh's army. Roughly when do we think he's born? Right, and I think he's probably born either just a little bit before Ranjit Singh, around about that sort of time. We got to check. He's 70, 80. But then you look at by Maharaj Singh and you think, well, okay, in the images, like if even in the painting that's in the exhibition, how old does he look to you? When you look at that picture, how old is he?
Young, 30s, 30s. He's got black beard, 2030s,
Okay, so let's go the upper limit of what you said.
45.
Okay. Let's go to try and help this cause, right? We'll go on the upper limit. He doesn't look 50, does he? Really?
No.
All right. So, okay, let's say he looks 45. If he's 45, and that picture's in 1850, then he's born in 1805.
Yeah.
All right. Now, if he's born in 1805, and Bir Singh Aurangabad is whatever, he's 17, 80, 70, 90. I had a little check.
But Baba Bir Singh looks old in that picture, right?
But Baba Bir Singh, so Baba Bir Singh might be 15, 20 years older, so Baba Bir Singh might be Ranjit Singh's age, right, roughly, and then maybe Bhai Maharaj Singh is born around about 1800, 1805. If he's born 1800, 1805, right, let's say he's born 1800, he is then 56 when he dies, because he dies in 1856. So now we know that he can't be that much older than 56. This man's not 56, right? But if this photograph is 1817, let's say 1880, he could be 80.
I would even push it further than that, wouldn't you? Because the style of photography, that looks like he's sitting in his own house somewhere. He's comfortable, right?
So then suddenly the numbers do kind of begin to fall into place, don't they?
Yeah.
Because they fall into place both for the age of whoever is depicted in the painting, which then also ties into the age of Bhai Maharaj Singh in the other paintings and the frescoes. So that feels right.
Yeah.
50 years old, 45, late 40s. But then equally, that then gives you the birth date of around about 1800, 1805, which then also ties into that. So now that suddenly he can also make sense, can't he? Because of the... So that's quite... All of that then, you still obviously haven't got any answers, yeah? But it's...
No, but I don't think we should put any answers on there because...
but this is the thing. So basically the question for everybody to ask is, if they're both by Maharaj, how can that possibly be? And, one of the theories, obviously, what we're going to get into is maybe, maybe the Singh in the portrait, the Singh, and this actually links back right to the very beginning of what we were speaking about how we're talking about, Ranjit Singh fighting those 30,000 Afghans, talking about Ranjit Singh watching his guys eating his food for 2 hours before he gets to eat his food. We're talking about, warriors. We were talking about the East India Company. We're talking about right into, this is the Punjab, one of the last places to be conquered by the East India Company. We're talking about, thorn in the side of the British, what we're not going to have he's not going to have a double. What I love, and I think this is, and I can't take credit for this because this is, a story that I think is, people have been thinking about, not talking about particularly guys from Kashi House, but like, this is maybe not what people want to hear necessarily, but actually I think it's a more special story. Yeah. Because now, the funny thing is maybe we are looking at Bhai Maharaj, and maybe he didn't go there. Price on his head, 10,000 rupees. He's been hunted down. He's not just anybody. This is a guy who is about to assassinate Henry Lawrence. Like, he's a serious guy. So like, we know that there's records of other doubles in Sikh history. Guru Gobind Singh has, Sangat Singh in Jamkor. These are people that, Saddam Hussein had doubles. People have doubles, right? Yeah. And particularly at a time when, remember this, like, at that time, there's no photography, really, in the early period. So you can get away with being a double. But what you're working on a painting, a description of someone. You haven't got a photographic record of having... So someone says, for example, in Sangat Singh, like they say that, he looked like the Guru, he acted like the Guru, he talks like the Guru, behaves like him, dresses like him. Well, then to somebody else, like, oh my God, that guy's wearing a galgi, must be him. He fits the description that we had. Yeah. So
and it's not like Guru Gobind Singh had an Instagram profile.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Imagine. But it's so, I mean, I think that's fascinating in itself. Is that why would we assume that they wouldn't have had that in place?
I think it's fantastic that we've gone full circle, and I think the fact that we laced this entire conversation with you, that storytelling is probably the foundation for the work that you do, and you do it so effortlessly. And just reflecting on my exposure to the work that you've done so far, the way that you've even set up your Instagram page, where whenever you want to show something, it takes up maybe 8 or more squares, and the first bit of that entire picture that you see is one little square. And that draws you in to open up that profile and look at it in its entirety. Oh, no,
thanks. I've removed some of those. I've got to put those back. I've kind of played around with it a little bit recently, but I appreciate that. And I suppose that in itself was like a curation of some sort. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And it was, and not everybody's happy about it, actually, to be honest with you. You're one of the few, actually. Some people don't like that. It's like an irritating way to scroll through images sometimes. But there are a few that liked seeing stuff in that. No, thanks very much. No, I think the storytelling, which you guys have brought out as well, because it's, this is the thing, isn't it? This is what we're looking for. We're looking for, you're seeking something, which is forcing, us all to ask questions. You're not accepting just what's been given. Like, we have to question, don't we? And then we end up learning more.
You mentioned, I guess, a wish for more people to get involved in these kind of things. Like, what would you recommend? What is the entry point for anybody that's listening and they're inspired by this, and they have that personality type and they feel that connection to it, but they just don't know where to start? What would you recommend?
I think I always recommend books. Like, to begin with, like, it's the first thing, is just get some books on the subject. And there are so many now really that can keep you kind of occupied for a while. I'm sure you guys have reading lists that that you'd happily share with people. Like, I think that's where it begins. We're also like privileged enough to have certain books that have been published on art, it's kind of learning history through that vehicle. And then also just to visit collections, like there's various collections, whether it's, a temporary exhibition like this or other museum collections, or contacting museums, see what's in their archives, searching archives, and then just beginning to go on that journey. Like, I think that's where it begins. And the other little secret actually is also keep a good eye on auctions, because many of the works that you see later on in a museum might have been in an auction. So when it's there, you have access to it, like to be able to see it, to view it, to ask questions about it, to look at the back of it, So like, even if you don't have to be a buyer, but visiting, watching the auction, saying, this picture's coming up, we better go and have a look at it. Only recently, for example, I acquired a painting of probably one of the earliest paintings of Guru Har Gobind outside of India. Circa 1700, perhaps late 17th century, and that turned up in a sale somewhere. So it's like there are pieces that serve things. So just get involved that way, I think.
The question I'm dying to ask is, when Juan brought it up that 3 years ago you hinted at the fact that that you were going to do an exhibition at the Wallace. Is there anything in the pipeline for the future?
Nothing concrete. I mean, I'm kind of consciously kind of just not making any kind of final decisions about what to do next, as I kind of just absorb what's happening with this show and see where the kind of dust settles and see what comes of it. But at the back of my mind is always looking at how we push this conversation forward in perhaps different directions, and what other themes do we explore other than the one that we've just explored. What else are we now ready to maybe look at and start talking about? So I'm always thinking about that. So always question I had, but nothing, sadly. I'm not keeping it from you. I just genuinely don't know yet. So
we'll definitely be there if there is anything. I mean, we're massive supporters, and it's the inspiration that you guys have left as a legacy for us, and hopefully someone picks it up.
I got a good fun fact that relates to everything we were talking about, the word Mundavarni. So at the end of the Sri Adi Guru Granth Sahib, we have Mundavarni Mahalla Panjwa. And when you look in the Mahan Kosh, what the word Mundavarni means stamp. And it relates back to food testing. Back in the day in a king's court in India, you would have an official langri. So you would have an official cook. And that official cook would be the only person that had access to a very specific stamp. And when they would prepare the food, they would cover it all up, and on top of it you would put something called a Mundavarni. And on that Mundavarni you would put that stamp, and only the official Langri would have access to that stamp. It was part of his, you could say, his responsibility to look after that Mundavarni. And in front of the king, he would be the only person that would be allowed to open the Mundavarni. Linking back to this worry of food being poisoned, etc. So the only person that could ever open that piece was called the Mundavarni.
Fair enough. Go on. Well, I've been doing a quick Reddit whilst you've been talking, and I have been paying attention, I promise. But the fact that's come up is a blue whale's... I feel ashamed saying this after such an intellectual conversation that we've had. But... a blue whale's fart is large enough to house a horse.
It's large enough to house... So it's got a volume.
It's got a volume. Yeah, it's large enough. Because it's an air bubble, right?
Yeah.
It can house a horse.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Well, I've got one then.
But this is linked.
Watch this link. I'll link. Only because you've thought about horse and volume. Yeah. Right? So this is weirdly linked to that trip to Pakistan. We went to Hari Singh Nalwa's house, which is now a masjid, and they gave us a tour of this house. And we went to this house, and it had various levels beneath it. One level of which they said to us was like a cooling space where the walls, the cavities could fill up with some water, and it would keep this cool. Like beneath, no windows in it. But there's a little fun fact. But there was another level beneath, which had a hidden tunnel big enough for him and two horses. to ride underneath the village and escape the other end. Wow. So
I'll just read what you're looking at. It's not on the same line as it. But in Japan, more paper is used to make manga, so cartoons, than toilet paper. Thank you very much, man. Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you very much.